Good afternoon. This is Gary with the Avid Cyclists on the Avid Cyclist channel. And once again, we are joined by the Cyclist Lawyer, Andrew Phillips. We spoke on Friday, right when the jury on the Magnus White trial had taken the case into the jury booth to vote and decide a verdict. Since then, a verdict came out late on Friday night. I think it was around 10 o'clock of guilty of vehicular manslaughter. Was it vehicular manslaughter or homicide?
Homicide, reckless driving.
Vehicular homicide, I stand corrected,
Yeah.
and from reckless driving. And it was a very well publicized case, has gotten a lot of attention. And we're really lucky once again to have Andrew with us. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Hey, good to see you again, Gary. That was a long night for everybody, I'm sure.
I know you and I, when we finished talking and you were on your way out to Utah, we thought probably Monday morning because they didn't reach a decision and they don't tell anybody what's going on inside.
I think they got the case at 3 o'clock. It came around to 5. They still had to reach the verdict. They got the case around. They got the case around 3 o'clock, and they hadn't reached the verdict by 5. We weren't sure if that meant they were going home for the night or if they're going to come back on Monday. Sounds like they ended up staying all night, so they put in, what is that, like, a good 7 hours, just combing through all the evidence and going through all the testimony. Clearly the jury did their job. They didn't come into it lightly, and they weighed all the facts. And I'm sure that to be on that jury was no easy thing. And so kudos to them for stepping up and doing their civic duty. That's what we should all do when we're called upon. So
any surprises? I mean, were you surprised? I know the last day we talked about it on Friday. That was probably the most dramatic 3 hours of trial I've ever seen.
Yeah. It some turns I didn't expect. That those last few testimonies, with Nettie and the officer again, and then the defendant herself taking the stand. That blew me away. I couldn't believe that she did that. I don't think she did a great job on the stand for herself. I think that she probably would have been better off not taking the stand at all. But I'm glad that she did. She needed to answer some questions. It's important that she be held accountable, and part of that is answering questions about what the heck happened here.
And I thought it was interesting. She, obviously through the investigation, she changed her story.
Yeah.
And the defense attorney, and we talked about this on Friday, literally contradicted that, saying how she admitted and was always saying she took responsibility since day one, which wasn't the truth. 6 months, she was saying it was the breaks. So she got herself into trouble on the stand, and the lawyer doubled down by saying the same thing in his closing.
Yeah, Mike Doherty picked up on that perfectly in his second closing. The way that this works in a criminal case is that the prosecution gets to do a closing, the defense does a closing, then there's a rebuttal. Not as long as the first closing remarks, but they do get a few minutes for rebuttal. And Mike honed in really quickly on, it wasn't since day one. Her stories changed all along the way. And for 5 months, she maintained it was a steering and had nothing to do with her personally. And that's just not the facts. So, yeah, I think that really.
For me, from just like I said, once again, I'm not an attorney. I don't cover trials that much. But from a layman's point, that just gave Doherty the ultimate, most dramatic way to let the jury go back and deliberate.
It's oftentimes that way in cases. You don't really know what your case is going to be until you're there. You know what all the facts are. You know what the pieces are. You know what the material is. But you don't really know what the structure is going to look like until you're in that moment and you have to stand up. And, Mike only had a couple minutes to think of that closing and put it all together. And by the time he stood back up, that's a great attorney there.
Yeah, it was, to me, that was just the ultimate last words of the trial. And that's, the last impression is sometimes more important than the first impression. That's what they went into deliberation with, was that impression of, wow, her and her attorney got caught lying.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I feel great for the White family.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a bittersweet thing, right? To finally have some recognition of the crime is all it really is. That there's some peace and comfort that can come from that, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't fix anything for their family and for what they're going through.
No.
But the system came through and said, yes, this is a crime. We recognize that. and we're going to do what we can to hold her accountable within the confines of the laws as we have them now. So that is a victory in itself, but a very small one given the grand picture.
Yeah, it's just amazing. When you see something like this, the amount of lives that are impacted were amazing.
Yeah, a
It
lot.
was.
And for the defendant, she really destroyed a lot of opportunities that she's been given in this country.
Mhm.
She could have had a completely different path here, and she chose a really awful path. And as a result, she's thrown her life into a great turmoil. I hope that someday she finds a way out and can find some good. But she's on a really awful path right now, and she completely stopped the path of a very promising person. Magnus had a lot of light to give, and that was snuffed out because of her just terrible decisions.
So with sentencing, she's not a U.S. citizen, obviously. When she's sentenced, could deportation be part of that, or would that be I don't know how that works. Would that be part of it?
Man,
Could that be part after the sentence,
boy,
after jail, or how does that work?
we don't know for certain what her legal status is here. She's on a green card. She's on refugee status. We have no idea. There's talk of her establishing residency in 2017, well before the Ukraine war.
Right, that was brought up in the
Yeah.
in the last 2 hours of the trial.
Yeah, and so we just honestly don't know. They have not had to disclose that information. I would expect that at sentencing that some more light will be shed on all of that. That we'll have a better understanding of what her legal status is here. I'm sure that they'll bring that up in sentencing. Sentencing is scheduled for June 13th at 10 a.m. and it's possible that it gets moved. Sometimes those dates do move, so pay close attention in case it does.
Sure.
But for now, that's the date, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of people that will want to be a part of that and be there and show their support, and the court will have to make accommodations for that.
Oh yeah, and just I'm sure there'll be a line of victims' impact statements to be given that day.
Yeah,
So that'll be another long, long, long day, I'm sure.
it will. It'll be a full day, and I think that there will be some way for people to submit written statements,
Mhm.
letters, testimonials, that sort of thing, so that if they can't speak, then at least their voice can be heard otherwise. But as a cycling community, I expect and hope that we'll all step up and say, this is important, what's happening here, and
Mhm.
the jury found her guilty, and it's important that she be held accountable under that guilty finding.
And sentencing on this, my understanding, 2 to 6 years.
Yeah, that's what the sentencing guidelines say, is anywhere between 2 and 6 years. But there are weird things that happen with criminal cases like this, where it's possible that they don't serve the time, or the full time. Anyways, that's just the criminal world that we live in.
Sure.
That sometimes there's different factors that get taken into place that the time's greatly reduced even beyond the sentence. So it's hard to know exactly how long she might serve in jail. We just don't really know until we get there.
Well, in this kind of case, and not to nitpick, it's prison. I mean, you go to prison on this one, not jail,
Yeah, you're
which
right.
is
You're
a
right.
different world.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, not my world, right? That's not what I do. So
Right.
I'm speculating a bit. I'm in the civil world. I don't do a lot of criminal. So yeah, it is prison, in fact. And one thing that we need to be aware of is that there is an appeals process that she's still entitled to file an appeal within, I think, 49 days of the verdict. So I think that puts it about May 28th or so, somewhere around
Mhm.
there, that she could file an appeal, and that could, delay everything even more.
Do you see anything that happened that would justify an appeal
But
that you saw?
well, But anytime you're in a trial and a judge is ruling on evidence coming in, if the judge rules against the defendant, that's potentially an appealable issue. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, hey, you ruled against me. They are allowed to have another body of court take a look at that ruling and say whether or not that was the correct ruling. Now, whether or not that means that it gets upheld or turned over or whatever, it's just that creates that issue. If there were no objections to any evidence coming in, then there's no appeal. But there were plenty of objections, plenty of
For
times that
sure.
her defense attorney said, I don't think that evidence should come in. Now, the judge didn't think he was right, and I don't know that an appeals court would differ from the judge. I think she was incredibly smart, incredibly thoughtful, and very experienced. I think the judge got it right, but that being said, the defendant still has the right to have a second look at all of her decisions.
Okay, here's just a little question. If they said, okay, this was, let's say they found one objection that should have been not overruled or opposite,
Yeah.
and it was in, and the appeals process said, okay, that shouldn't have been taken. Does that mean the case is overturned, or we go back to square one just for one? Or is could it be something like, yes, this was wrong, but it really wasn't that, it wasn't going to change the case?
Well, and that's the key: was it a material fact? So
Okay.
it's that's the magic word. Was it material to the outcome of the case? If the appeals court says, well, yes, they shouldn't have let that in, but it's not a material issue, then
Hmm.
the holding stands. The guilty finding stands. If it's a material issue where the court of appeals says, actually, the whole case could have turned on that one issue, there is the potential that it could be ordered to go back and retry the case. That can happen. I'd be very, very surprised if it happened in this case. I don't
Hmm.
think I didn't see any glaring issues that made me think, oh boy, that shouldn't have come in.
Yeah,
Everything all well within the purview of the judge.
yeah, everything I saw and heard, most of it I was just listening to, but I never heard anything that was just a major appeal type argument.
Yeah, and of course there was some evidence that was kept out of the case
Mhm.
that had it come in, I think that would have made a bigger impact on that potential.
Like what?
Well, specifically, if you read the motions in limine that are public record, there were issues about whether or not she was trying to buy cocaine the morning of the crash.
Hmm.
He was texting around trying to find cocaine. And in one of the photographs that was taken from the video of her singing karaoke, there was a mirror with lines of cocaine on that mirror. So it seemed pretty obvious that there was drug usage outside of what was actually allowed in the court. But the court ultimately found that they didn't have enough evidence of that to be able to prove that to a point where she thought, the judge, that it would not be an appealable issue. So she kept it out. And rightfully so or not, what it did do is it took away a really easy appeal. I think that would have come for sure on the cocaine usage and whether or not she was
Sure.
buying cocaine, using cocaine. If you don't have enough evidence, you can't swing and miss. You have to swing and hit.
Mhm.
And so I think that the judge just saw that that was going to be a swing and miss, and it was going to cause some issues down the line.
Any other comments about that trial? Now that it's over, and what's next?
Well, I mean, next we just got to get through, see if they file the appeal. We got to get a sentencing, hopefully in June, and then of course our case on the civil case, we've got to petition the court to reopen that case for us because currently it's stayed pending the outcome of all this. I have to wait and see what happens on the appeal. If she does appeal, if it gets taken up, I might be stayed a little bit longer. It takes time, unfortunately.
Sure. And there could be an appeal after the sentencing as well.
But it can be, yeah. So she can get a sentence, and then even with that,
And we just lost Andrew.
so even with the
There you
sentence,
are. You're back.
yeah, yeah. Sorry.
No
Even with the
worries.
sentencing, they could appeal whatever the sentence is, but I don't think that would slow down my case at that point. I
Okay.
should forward.
Okay. Any other final thoughts about the whole thing? I mean, it's
I mean,
been.
it's been such a long time coming, almost 2 years.
Mhm.
9 months now, um, and I think for the White family, it's just probably as raw as it's ever been, and I can't imagine what they're going through. And it's such an awful thing to lose a child in this way. So painful for them. I hope that
Mhm.
they have.
Yeah, I met them. Oh my gosh, coming up a year ago, this coming May,
Right.
and immediately after, got to be on the group that worked with them on the Ride for Magnus last year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, that was just getting to know them, be part of that is one of the single biggest honors and humbling experiences, I should say, that I've ever had. And it was just it was the first cycling event that I've ever driven home crying the whole way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just lost track of what day I was at, everything. It was such an emotional day. And to see how many people that Magnus White, whose lives he touched, and this whole event is touched. It was just amazing. And like I said, humbling. And it's just been an honor getting to know them and all the different things that came from that. In fact, it was at the Ride for Magnus right afterwards, having a slice of pizza that I met you.
Yeah, we had a good conversation then about all this and where things were going, and I'm grateful that it brought us together for that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope nobody else ever has to go through this. I constantly say, and I believe that accountability equals responsibility. And so when we hold people accountable, then people will act more responsible. And so hopefully this is a big rallying cry for everybody out there.
I hope so too. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to having you back on again, as you're one of the big supporters of Avid Cyclist and our site and our business. So it's great having you, and I'm looking forward to having you to discuss something maybe even happier. But and I wish you would get well. It sounds like what did you bring back from Utah, dude? Oh, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Andrew went out and competed in a gravel race out in Utah called the one of my favorite names.
Yeah, I think I choked on one of those salty lizards.
It was called the Salty Lizard, and it was at the Bonneville Salt Flats. But it sounded like a great event. I'm sorry he couldn't join you, but that's why he's a little bit under the weather right now.
Yeah, I might have burned up those lungs that I didn't have.
Well, take care of yourself, man, and we'll be seeing you soon.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.